Today I'm going to be talking about two very important passages from the Bible for apologetics between Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox. And these verses pertain to the question of venerating the saints. So in Revelation 19:10 and Revelation 22:8 through 9, John does proskynesis to an angel. And proskynesis is bowing or doing obeisance or worshiping or venerating. And in both cases, the angel tells John, do not do that. So Revelation 19:10 says, and I fell at his feet to worship, using that word proskynesis there. But he said to me, see that you do not do that. I am your fellow servant and of your brethren who have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And we have a very similar instance in Revelation 22:8 through 9. It says, and when I heard and saw, I fell down to worship, proskynise, okay, before the feet of the angel who showed me these things. Then he said to me, see that you do not do that, for I am your fellow servant, and of your brethren, the prophets, and of those who keep the words of this book. Okay, so the word worship there is proskynesis. Well, the word proskynesis is also the Greek word for veneration, and this is used by Catholics and Orthodox to describe venerating the saints. So we have a quote here from the Seventh Ecumenical Council. It says, icons are to be accorded greeting and the veneration. That's proskynesis. The word used here is proskynesin, of honor. Okay, so therefore, Protestant apologists often use these passages from Revelation to demonstrate that Christians should not venerate the saints.
So here we see the angel telling John the Apostle not to venerate him.
And if isolated and at face value, this seems to be a very strong argument, right? You have the same word in Greek being used for venerate, and the angel is saying, do not do that. Okay, so that seems to be a very strong argument. However, if we interpret this passage to mean that honorific bowing, okay, or veneration to creatures is wrong, then we actually contradict the Bible itself. So the Bible in other places shows humans bowing to other people and angels, even using the same word proskynesis or its Hebrew equivalent shakah, and to angels, and they accept it. Okay, so people and angels are receiving proskynesis in other places in the Bible, and they're accepting it without any indication of idolatry. So if we take these passages in Revelation 19 and Revelation 22 to be blanket condemnations of doing proskynesis to creatures, we run into issues in other passages of the Bible. So for example, 1 Samuel 24:28 says, David also arose afterward, went out of the cave, and called out to Saul, saying, my Lord, the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed down. And that word in Hebrew for bowed down is shakah. It's the Hebrew equivalent of proskynesis. In the Septuagint, it is proskynesis. 1 Samuel 25:23 says, now when Abigail saw David, she dismounted quickly from the donkey, fell on her face before David, and bowed down to the ground. We have another one here, 1 Kings 1:31. Then Bathsheba bowed with her face to the earth and paid homage. The word there in Hebrew is shakah, that Hebrew word for proskynesis, bowing, doing obeisance to the king, and said, let my Lord, King David, live forever. Matthew 18:26, this is a New Testament passage, says, the servant therefore fell down, uses the word proskynesis before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. There is no indication whatsoever that any of these instances is worshipful or rejected or bad or idolatrous. So obviously, the Bible in other places is showing that in some contexts, with certain intentions, doing this proskynesis or shakah is not a bad thing. It's not something that should be rejected. And this is all over the Bible. This is just a handful of the many instances where we have people doing proskynesis, bowing down to somebody, but the intention is not idolatry. The intention is something else. It's paying homage, it's greeting, it's imploring for something. There are other reasons why they're doing this, and all of these reasons where the Bible gives examples of positive instances, the person doesn't reject it like the angel rejected it. Well, we even have Bible passages with angels receiving, bowing, prostrating, proskynesis, and they don't reject it. In Genesis 19:1, Lot bows to the two angels who came. Genesis 19:1 says, "Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself," there's that Hebrew word shakah, "with his face toward the ground." So here are two angels, and Lot is doing proskynesis to these two angels, and they're not rejecting it. They're not saying, don't do that, right? So obviously something is different in this case, and it's not just a general blanket a rejection of doing proskynesis to angels. That's obviously not always bad in all cases. So there's something special about John's proskynesis, which we'll be talking about later why that's different. But you can see that it's not always bad. We have Daniel in Daniel 8:17 doing a prostration to Gabriel, the angel. It says in Daniel 8:17, "So he," that's Gabriel, "came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, 'Understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end.'" There's no rebuke from Gabriel in this passage when David falls down on his face before this angel. In Daniel 10:13 through 15, we have a similar story. Daniel prostrates before Michael, the angel Michael. It says, "And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come. When he had spoken such words to me, I turned my face to the ground and became speechless." So again, Daniel's falling down with his face to the ground in front of this angel Michael, and Michael's not rebuking him. He's not saying, don't do that, like the angel in Revelation. We have an instance in Luke, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verse 5. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome fell down on their faces before the angels in the tomb of Jesus. Luke 24:5 says, "And it happened as they were greatly perplexed about this, that behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. Then as they were afraid and bowed their faces to the earth." So these three women see these two angels and they're afraid and they bow and prostrate before these angels. And again, there's no rebuke. The angels don't say, don't do that, get up. They accept it in this particular instance. So the interpretation of Revelation 19 and Revelation 22 cannot just be a simple blanket statement that bowing to creatures is bad, okay, or doing it in proskynesis to a creature is bad. Because if that's the case, then it contradicts the Bible itself in other places. So we need to find an interpretation for these passages in Revelation that doesn't contradict other passages in the Bible. So I'm going to go over three interpretations for this passage which are consistent with other places in the Bible. So option number one, according to St. Augustine, the angel interpreted John's act as divine worship and rejected it. St. Augustine writes, "He," that's an angel, "was teaching a disciple of Christ and showing him many wonders in the revelation of John. And when some wonderful vision had been shown to him, he trembled and fell down at the angel's feet. But that angel, who sought not but the glory of God, said, See thou do it not, for I am a fellow servant of thee, and of thy brethren, the prophets. What then, my brethren? Let no man say, I fear lest the angel may be angry with me if I worship him not as my God. He is then angry with thee when thou hast chosen to worship him, for he is righteous and loveth God. As devils are angry if they are not worshipped, so angels are angry if they are worshipped instead of God." So he's using this story of the angel receiving the proskynesis of John as an example of worship, collere in Latin, this divine worship to the angel. And if this interpretation is correct, then the angel is not rejecting an expression of honor, a bowing of honor, but divine worship that John is giving to the angel. So in this interpretation, this passage has nothing to do with proskynesis of honor. It has to do with proskynesis of worship. And that's what the angel is rejecting. So it has more to do with what's in John's heart or intention that's going on here, not with the act itself. And this is supported also by the angel's own words when he uses the word fellow servant. So he's talking about how he doesn't want to be, he doesn't want John to be his servant. Okay, this relationship of servant to master. The second option is that John is equally honorable to the angel. So by the time that when John had his revelations, humanity had been elevated through the incarnation of Christ to a status equal to the angels. So the angel may have felt that it was inappropriate for someone of equal honor to bow to him. So by the incarnation, humanity was united with divinity in the person of Jesus Christ. So humanity was elevated. So from that point forward, perhaps angels didn't want to be honored by humans because they were at the same level of honor. And this interpretation finds support in St. Bede. He writes, after that, the Lord Jesus Christ raised the person of man, which he assumed above the heavens. The angel feared to be worshipped by man, namely as worshipping the God-man above himself. Yet we read of this having been done before the incarnation of the Lord by men, and not in any wise forbidden by the angels. So St. Bede is connecting that, okay, there's a difference between bowing to an angel before the incarnation and after the incarnation, because by Jesus Christ's incarnation, humanity was raised. This is another possible interpretation of why the angel rejected John's proskynesis. Maybe it was honorific, maybe he was doing a veneration, but the angel didn't want to be venerated by somebody who's equal to or higher than himself in honor. The third option is that John possibly mistook the angel for Christ. Maybe he thought that the angel was Christ. So perhaps John offered divine worship to the angel because he mistook the angel for Christ. This option is mentioned by George Haydock. He writes, he, John, took him, the angel, who then appeared to him, to be our Savior Christ, God and man, as some expound it. So some people have this interpretation that John thought the angel was Jesus, so he's giving him worship, but the angel is correcting him, saying, no, don't worship me, I'm just the angel, worship Christ. Okay, so this interpretation resolves the question of how John, a lifelong Jew and disciple of Christ, could make such an obvious mistake as worshiping an angel. So the first interpretation, that interpretation by St. Augustine, that John is giving worship, divine worship to this angel, doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the context of John's life. He's a lifelong Jew, he's a disciple of Christ, he should know better than to worship an angel. Well, maybe he didn't know it was an angel, maybe he thought it was Christ himself that he was looking at. So the bottom line is, whichever interpretation that you take, the passage cannot be condemning veneration to angels or bowing, because there are other places in the Bible where you see this practice and it's not condemned. So to be consistent, you have to find an interpretation that works with all the passages of the Bible, not just an isolated instance in Revelation. So there are alternative explanations which don't condemn veneration. I gave you 3 options here, and you can determine for yourself which one you think makes the most sense. So that's what I have for today's video. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. I love hearing from you. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.